Hey YouTubers, this is the GSTV reviewer coming at you with my TV finale reactions video for you guys today. So in this video I'm going to be discussing about my thoughts on Arrow, Flash, and Power Rangers Dino Supercharge, which is currently on its mid-season hiatus. So I'm going to take this opportunity to discuss about my thoughts on the current state of these three TV shows. So without further ado, I'm going to be kicking off my video by discussing my brief thoughts so far on Power Rangers Dino Supercharge. So overall this season, I mean, it's still a very watchable season for the most part. But there's been interesting story arcs that have come going in this season that a lot of it just seems very rushed. A lot of it just seemed kind of like a convoluted mess. And I also want to really take this opportunity to, further address that situation. So, going into Dino Supercharge, it was actually, going into I was very optimistic with where the direction it was going. Judging by, what the events that happened in the mid-season finale of Dino Charge. So, we saw Sledge and his headquarters get demolished when, you had Keeper, Kendall, and Tyler going in the headquarters and trying to retrieve the energem, the purple energem that Kendall would end up having. So they get out of the ship and Sledge ends up getting supposedly destroyed, in the process, and Poisandra ended up making the escape, basically turning on Sledge. So the whole ship was destroyed, and the Power Rangers all thought that they finally defeated evil once and for all, or at least what it seemed at the time. But then we get to the cliffhanger of the season finale, and it turns out Snide managed to escape from his prison cell. He had been there for the last few episodes, and so Snide and Sledge had this sort of conflict that was going on. And now that Sledge is out of the way, Snide ends up taking over the role as the main villain, especially during the second half of Dino Charge. And going into it, I was very optimistic with where it was going. Snide was kind of more of a mischievous, like he is willing to do what he can to go out of his way and seek out the Energems and specifically the Power Rangers, and trying to come up with different ways of trying to infiltrate the Power Rangers headquarters. And it was actually very interesting at first because Snide ends up, the Power Rangers end up befriending Snide. Snide ends up meeting up with the Power Rangers, and they aren't really sure at first whether to trust him. And Snide eventually finds out that the Power Rangers' identities, and ends up accepting a promise that he shouldn't reveal their identities to the public. So secretly enough, Snide knew who the Power Rangers were, and Power Rangers didn't know his evil intentions. So I thought that was actually a pretty interesting twist. And I thought going into it that they were gonna stretch this out for a couple episodes, maybe until like mid-season, where the Power Rangers do eventually figure out that Snide was actually using the Power Rangers to to confiscate their energems and all that sort of thing. So, and it was like only 3 episodes in that the Power Rangers quickly knew that Snide was actually using them all along. So, I don't know. It was just kind of seemed so subtle. It was actually, on one hand, it was very smart enough for the Dino Power Rangers to actually find out Snide was, going after the Rangers all along, trying to, try to keep a low profile while trying to establish a bond with the Power Rangers. I mean, I figured it was going to be a long-term thing, but I guess going into it, I was, I had some high expectations, and and the fact that Snide just kind of the Power Rangers ended up knowing what Snide was going on all along. So, I think the bottom line, what I'm trying to say here, is that, Snide, I think he could have been, something that the Rangers would end up trusting, but by the time they end up trusting him, Snide just ends up turning on them and revealing himself to his secret master plan and whatnot. That there's like a conspiracy going on between Snide and our main heroes. And not only that, but also factoring in Tyler's father, which had been kind of like an ongoing sub story for Tyler since the beginning of Dino Charge. And the fact that he just found his father just right out the get go, once again was very sudden. And I figured it would also be kind of like more of a kind of like a work in progress type of thing, where you'll have the Aqua Ranger debut like he did and save Tyler and the Power Rangers, but Tyler on the other hand is very intrigued by the Aqua Ranger and his stoic presence. So I figured they were going to do something along those lines where, Tyler is just wondering about, who the Aqua Ranger is and what his intentions are, whose side is he on. Um, and, basically this would kind of stretch out for a few episodes where Tyler ends up finding out that maybe Tyler's father might be inside that helmet, but it turns out that maybe Aqua Ranger isn't Tyler's father, so you maybe build up that whole the whole suspense or plot twist, however you want to describe it. And then when the time comes, like during like a critical situation, you would think maybe Tyler, that eventually Tyler would end up finding out that the Aqua Ranger is actually his father, James. So maybe some sort of accident that happens, Aqua Ranger randomly demorphs. He finds out um, that his father was actually the Aqua Ranger all along. And it just kind of, I just felt like they could have done some, like, it should have been like a really big deal. And I think that, like I mentioned about having high expectations going into this season, that there would be some sort of twists and turns that would be kind of have me on the edge of my seat. And and especially even after when Tyler found out his father, once again after so many years of doing whatever he was doing, like you would think that maybe Tyler was gonna be infuriated, be sort of frustrated or angry at his dad for neglecting him after all these years. But what we got instead was like, "Hey, Dad, I'm glad that you're back." Yada 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 yada. And it just kind of felt a little unconvincing, unrealistic, and I just kind of felt that it had a lot of potential, and just the way that how it was executed just kind of seemed out of nowhere, or it just seemed kind of like it just happened so fast, and you would think this they would kind of stretch this out, for a good number of episodes, but it is what actually happened. So, um, I mean, Dino Supercharge, I mean, it's still a watchable season in my eyes, but I just feel like it's a bit of a step down when you compare it to Dino Charge. I mean, you have all these, filler episodes, and, you had an episode with Home Run Coda, which was not really kind of like one of my least favorite episodes of that particular Dino Charge season. It's like, Riley's just so ambitious, like he really wants to try out for this baseball team, and he drags Kodo along to play baseball, and all of a sudden he's making all these consistent home runs, and just catching everyone by surprise. And even when he joins the baseball team, it was just very unrealistic considering the fact that they were playing national right from the get-go. So I don't know. It was just a very weird episode, and Riley's just being more arrogant and very unlikable. I mean, especially since he's a Power Ranger, but yet he chooses to play baseball over continuing his duty as a Power Ranger. So it's stuff like that is just kind of really scratches my head. It's like, why is Riley even a Power Ranger to begin with? Like, you would think the Power Rangers they would have just kicked him out from the get-go if Riley was just being all full of himself and stuff. And even Coda knew deep inside that that it wasn't right. And I honestly don't blame him. So, yeah, I mean, you have some filler episodes that were just kind of blah, in my opinion. doesn't really contribute to the main storyline and whatnot. Um, and even Dino Charge can get a little too silly at times, which could be a problem, but not like in the sense of Megaforce type of silly where it's just the humor was just all filled with lame pun jokes um and just a lot of bantering during fight scenes. I mean, like with Dino Charge, it still has that, but it's not as cringeworthy as Megaforce. I think we could do without all those filler episodes. I know that episode where what was that episode? With Chase, the Black Ranger, ends up meeting up with this girl named Kaylee, and he really wants to reveal himself to be the Black Ranger. Whether or not he wants to really use his try to reveal his identity as a Power Ranger. Um, I mean, it wasn't a terrible episode, but I felt like it could have been an episode that could have been like there was also a side story where Tyler's actually looking for his father. So why not focus on Tyler searching for his father and all that stuff? Why not make that the main focal point of the episode? And you could have done the Chase episode as kind of like a secondary storyline. So I mean, it just didn't make any sense to me, and especially since the Tyler since that's been kind of like the focal point since the beginning of the Dino Charge. So maybe you could. I mean, I don't see why they just kind of shafted it into like a little throwaway episode. But I mean, overall, I think Power Rangers Dino Supercharge is kind of a solid season, but it's just a little of a step down so far. I mean, then again, I probably shouldn't jump too soon necessarily since we've only got about, I want to say, let's see, what's 20 minus 8? About 12 episodes, after, going into Dino Charge that's left to air. So they've got a long ways to go. So maybe it's not appropriate of me to discuss about, just jump into conclusions about, what Dino Supercharge is going so far. But Dino, the first half was pretty cool, but second half just kind of slipped because of all these rush story arcs. Just paying, the way that they paid it off way too soon. It's like you could have stretched this out. And I know the Power Rangers movie is also coming out during this time, so maybe that might be the reason why they're kind of conserving more money in an effort to produce the Power Rangers movie. So maybe that might be why. But I mean, overall, Dino Supercharge is still watchable, but I just kind of felt a little let down so far. But hopefully, the next 12 episodes or so really change my mind, regarding the current state of Dino Charge and just basically overall, just my overall, discussing about my thoughts on Dino Charge in general, including, this season and the first half as well. So, we'll just have to wait and see this, just to see where it goes from here. So with Dino Supercharge out of the way, I also want to take this opportunity to discuss my thoughts on season 4 of Arrow and give out my overall thoughts as far as the direction that the TV show has been going through recently. So when it comes to season 4 of Arrow, it's just been kind of a downer season in my opinion, for the obvious reasons that a lot of fans have been kind of agitated over the past few years. A lot of it had to do with the big emphasis on the relationship between Oliver and Felicity and the mumbo jumbo drama that happened a couple episodes going in this season. Oliver finding out that his son William's out there in Star City, that the woman that Oliver ended up making out many years ago, his past is slowly starting to come back to him, and he's been keeping the secret that Oliver had a son for the longest time. But it took a while for some of his comrades, some of his friends, to realize that he did in fact had a son. But even though you had some of the supporting characters, especially with people like Diggle, Laurel, and Thea, end up finding out about Oliver's secret, they weren't necessarily too, but they didn't necessarily go ballistic. But then when you get to like Felicity's side of things, it's just kind of really freaked her out in a way. So I think a lot of the mumbo jumbo drama that happened, with Felicity and Oliver, they were in a limousine. Then there was like a shooting that was going on. This was at the time where Oliver was trying to campaign for being a mayor until certain circumstances that happened that had Oliver just decide to opt out as mayor. So, and then you also have, the controversial death of Laurel as the Black Canary. It's, man, when it comes to that, I mean, Arrow has had a history of killing off some of their main characters throughout each season. So it's been kind of more of a formulaic sort of thing that's been going on. I mean, first season you had Tommy get killed off during the I think it was like the undertaking towards the end of the first season. Season two you had Mora get killed off by Slade. Season three you had Sarah getting killed off, and eventually she ended up being resurrected by the Lazarus Pit going into season four. Um, Ray, who was designing kind of like a sort of a working relationship with Felicity, was working on the Atom costume, so everyone thought that he was killed at the end of season three. But it turns out that his experiment that went wrong turned out that he actually shrunk in size, so he didn't really die. But Team Arrow had to come in and rescue Ray and find where he is. Um, what else? And I mentioned about Laurel getting killed off, and it's I mean, it was leaked out on Twitter and other social media outlets, especially with Twitter and I believe Instagram, but most notably Twitter leaked out, um, the whole storyline as to who's in the grave. They've been playing it up in these teasers and trailers and whatnot. So people were very curious, and it turned out that Laurel was actually, her name was engraved on the tombstone, much to the chagrin of a lot of these fans. And some people weren't sure exactly, if it was actually true. And when the episode aired, especially when it came to the first couple minutes, and it was pretty obvious. There were some hints that they dropped that it turned out that it was actually Laurel in the grave because they were kind of building it up, like you've come a long way, Laurel, and so and so and so. And even Laurel showcasing her fighting ability, and it kind of got to a point where, yeah, it was pretty obvious that she was end up gonna get killed off towards the end of the episode. And I'm not sure if it's just. I mean, I know people had some problems with Laurel, especially in the beginning of the show's run, and it's going from being a lawyer and then resorting to drugs after having to deal with the death of her boyfriend Tommy, and then and then also having to grieve over her sister Sarah's death. So she decided to honor Sarah by dressing up as the Black Canary. So they were giving her some gradual development throughout these past 3, 4 seasons or so, and people slowly over time gravitated towards her, and then they killed her off like that. Which I mean, I can understand. They're trying to make Damien Dark out to be this big threat, this force to be awakened with. Um, but at the same time, however, it's like the Black Canary was one of the biggest, played a big part in the Green Arrow mythology, Green Arrow universe, depending on how you look at it. And it's like if they killed off Lois Lane in any of the Superman incarnations, whether it be like from the comics, the movies. Like in Smallville, like, it's one of those things where it's like they're just inseparable. And there was like new speculation that I think that there was just so many characters, especially a lot of female characters as part of the Team Arrow. That's when I think about Team Arrow, it kind of reminds me of sort of like the Scooby Gang from Buffy, where they would always change around the characters every season, and certain characters getting either killed off or they just end up moving away someplace. Like with Angel and Cordelia, they were part of the Scooby Gang, but once the main characters of Buffy ended up graduating high school, some of the characters, especially with Angel and Cordelia, breaking off into their own thing. They start their own investigation club with Angel Investigations. Um, Sort of reminds me of, with Team Arrow, kind of like the modern day version of the Scooby Gang. Um, so it was just very hard to kind of deal with. It's like, how do they follow that up? And then, you also have some very downer episodes, especially like the episode afterwards where you had like this little girl that was trying to be kind of like, uh, dressed up as the Black Canary and dishonoring her legacy and stuff. Um, I don't know. Even the finale episode was just kind of one of those run of the mill Arrow episodes where it's like the city is always being taken over. It's like, how many times is the city going to get overtaken by this so and so villainous faction? It's like, it's just so formulaic. Um, yeah, like, main character gets killed off, and then we have to go and avenge them and try to get some revenge, or um, try to seal the deal with the final villain. Um, so they didn't really plant any seeds for season five, except the fact that now Diggle's being back in the army once again. Um, Oliver might be considering running for mayor after what he did by just taking a stand and with his motivation speech. So he possibly might go try to campaign as mayor once again, or he ends up being mayor by default. So maybe there are some things that are planned for season five, but it just doesn't seem like there's not one too many to look forward to going into season five. Um, I don't know. We just have to wait and see. I mean, the season four. There were some good episodes, however. The episode where Constantine makes his appearance, I thought that was pretty cool. Where Laurel ends up bringing Sarah's deceased corpse and trying to resurrect her in the Lazarus pit. And the inspiration of that was because Thea actually had a fight with Ra's al Ghul and eventually killing Thea. So Oliver finds out and goes to the League of Assassins to resurrect Thea using the Lazarus Pit. So Laurel ends up doing the same thing, but this time with Sarah, since they never cremated her body or anything like that. So yeah, Sarah gets her body back, but her soul is, she doesn't have her soul at first. So they had to resort to bringing in Constantine to, try to find ways to, retrieve her soul, and which they ended up succeeding. So I thought that was actually a pretty cool episode. Um, I think some of the ones that Diggle, some of the Diggle episodes were pretty cool. Especially with him and his brother, who's actually secretly working for Hive. So I like the conflict that was going on between him and Diggle. So yeah, there were some enjoyable episodes from this season. So it's not entirely bad, but just the season in general, I've just seen better from Arrow, especially if you compare it from the first two seasons with Oliver coming back home from the island when everyone thought that he was dead, and now he's just trying to keep up to date and see what's been going on since he was away in those 5 years. Um, yeah, Oliver's rivalry with Malcolm. Season two with when they brought in Slade and Deadshot, and killing Oliver's mother when she was trying to run for mayor. Um, yeah, there was actually some really cool stuff that they did in the first two seasons. And I think a lot of the reasons why it's been kind of more of a soap opera element is, especially around the time when they brought in when they were pitching out a pilot for The Flash. So I think some of the not actors, but some of the main writers like Andrew Kresberg, Greg Berlanti were, focusing on, doing The Flash. I don't know if I want to be optimistic for season five. I mean, there isn't really any reason for me to look forward to it. Maybe except the fact that all this will be the season where, in terms of the flashbacks that they've been doing since the beginning of the show's run, that they're gonna finally have Oliver go back to where it all began. Seeing Oliver go back to Starling City once again, or there may be some kind of obstacles that Oliver will have to go through before making his way back to his home. Um, yeah, so I mean, I know even some of the flashbacks have been kind of hit or miss, more miss than hits. Um, when it comes to flashbacks, I mean, Arrow's flashbacks have just been kind of, they just don't really seem to correlate very well with like the main situation of an episode. And I could see where Arrow's flashbacks are kind of influenced by Highlander, which popularized the flashbacks trope. And with especially whether you look at the Highlander movie or the TV show in the early mid '90s, how they would handle the flashbacks is that they would use those characters uh, that either Connor or Duncan MacLeod has affiliated with, and how it correlates with the main situation of each episode. So there at least is a connection. And with the Highlanders flashbacks are like, they're very out of order, so they could do it like however direction that they want. But here in Arrow, it's kind of more like, chronological order. It's like one to the next, and they don't really have anything to do with the main focus of the episode. Unless it was like some occasions, like, when like the episode after Laurel died, you also had like these flashbacks with Oliver's time with Laurel back when they were in a relationship before, Oliver ended up cheating on Laurel for Sarah. So, yeah, there are some few occasions where flashbacks are appropriate, but most of the time, especially in recent years, Arrow just hasn't really impressed me much when it comes to the flashbacks, and that's been a common criticism throughout majority of the show's run. So my overall thoughts on Arrow, definitely needs to step its game up. It's definitely looking pretty bleak at the moment, and they really had a tendency to over dramatize a lot. Hopefully, Arrow season five gets better, or otherwise, I have no idea what they're doing with this show. Maybe I'll just stop watching it, like most people have. But I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. So now that Arrows aside, I also want to discuss about my thoughts on the season finale of The Flash and just my overall thoughts on season two in general. And overall, I gotta say I really enjoyed this season for the most part. And granted, it had its flaws. I mean, the way that they brought in Patty Spivot for a couple episodes as the co-detective for Joe, and and also a love interest for Barry, but things just didn't work out, and she just basically leaves, and we never got to see her again throughout the remainder of the season. So I thought that her role or her tenure on the show so far has been kind of underwhelming, sort of out there, just kind of a love plot device, just to kind of just give Barry a love interest. And they've been teasing Barry and Iris as a couple for the past two seasons, and um, so I want to kind of talk about the season finale a bit, since it's been kind of the talk of the town at the moment. So I thought the finale was good for the most part. I did see I was losing my train of thought because Barry's father Henry ends up getting killed by Zoom, which I actually saw coming. especially from the 22nd episode, which was um, yeah, where he gets killed off, which, I kind of sensed it was coming. I mean, Zoom just basically bailed out, and everything just seemed a little too much of a happy ending of sorts. I mean, Barry's just been overly optimistic ever since he managed to overcome the Speed Force. So Barry's just kind of been very overconfident in himself, and before you know it, Zoom goes out his way, kidnaps Henry, only to kill him in the end. And then we get to the episode after, which was the season finale where Barry and Zoom have their race to the finish just to see who's the fastest man alive. And Barry ended up winning, which was expected and stuff. And even despite Barry defeating Zoom once and for all, Barry isn't really that happy. I mean, he lost his parents, not just his mother, but also his father. So eventually it just comes crashing and burning. It just eats him up inside. Iris tries to support Barry, and they even had a moment together, even a kiss included. But even despite that, Barry's just he doesn't even realize what he has, because before you know it, he ends up going back to the same time where back in season one, where Barry and Zoom, or Barry and the Reverse Flash, excuse me, have their little fight going on, and Reverse Flash ended up killing Barry's mother. So what happens instead is, Barry ends up saving his mother and defeating Reverse Flash. So yeah, basically how that ends, especially with season two. And I don't know. I mean, like I said, I enjoyed it. Enjoyed the season finale somewhat, but especially with the ending, it just kind of threw me off guard. It's like Barry just didn't really know what he had. I mean, especially towards the end of season one, where Ebar and Thawne offered Barry an opportunity to go back in time and save his mother, but Barry decided not to do that. And basically, he has all these. He has guys like Joe and his father Henry just talking him out of this. It's like, are you sure you really want to do this? Are you sure you want to go back in time and undo everything that happened? I mean, you don't realize just how far you've come, since how mature that you've developed since you became the Flash, and all the friends that you've made. And yeah, it seemed like all that just it's just Barry just end up negating, and it just, I guess that's what happens when you're just so overconfident in yourself, and then when something unthinkable happens, and it just comes back to eat you alive. So my prediction as far as the finale is concerned, I think they might go in a "It's a Wonderful Life" approach. Um, Now I know there have been talks about the Flashpoint storyline, especially now that Supergirl's on the CW after going to CBS. I haven't really watched the whole last Supergirl, so I can't really go into detail about that. But yeah, basically the CW is basically now the home to all these DC television shows. And Supergirl's going to remain on Mondays with the same time slot and same night, but different network. Um, Flash is going to be on Tuesdays. Arrow stays on Wednesdays. Legends of Tomorrow remains on Thursdays. So yeah, basically 4 nights of DC television shows, and I'm not sure what I want to think about that, especially now that CW over the years has the more you think about it, it's kind of shifted away from kind of like the soap opera, contemporary soap opera shows like a One Tree Hill and the Seventh Heavens. I mean, granted, there's still a lot of soap opera elements still present in even some of their other TV shows, not just DC television shows, but even some of their action adventure shows with Vampire Diaries. Um, but CW's just been kind of cranking it up with a lot of their action adventure shows. And I mean, you have a couple of contemporary dramas like Jane the Virgin and Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which the more I think about it, it just kind of seems very out of place for those two shows, especially with the direction that the CW has been going in recent years. So you would think shows like that would have worked out well, maybe way back when, but they're I'm kind of getting off subject, so I apologize. But getting back to the Flash, so I think season two, I thought it was pretty good. I know some people kind of had high expectations, and some people just kind of felt let down by the season. But I actually enjoyed this season. I mean, if I had to choose, I honestly prefer the first season with Tom Cavanaugh's character as the main villain, and Eborn Thawne and his motivation. Trying to train Barry and make him out to be um, fastest man alive, and really try to use him as kind of like an experiment or a guinea pig of sorts. Um, what else I'm thinking? I mean, granted, season two does have its faults, with underutilizing Caitlyn, and especially after her husband Ronnie ended up sacrificing himself to try to close the black hole that Eborn Thawne made with his experiment, and tried to gain access to all these parallel universes. Um, I mean, I did enjoy her role as the Killer Floss, which I thought that was pretty cool. Um, let's see. Cisco, finding out his ability to look into the future. I thought that was pretty cool. It's kind of like Final Destination. Um, yeah, so I thought that was pretty cool that he found out that he had powers. Um, let's see. I mean, the team up they had with Arrow this year, I thought that was pretty solid. Um, it actually got some pretty high rating as well. One of the highest ratings of the show. I thought that was pretty cool. Um, let's see. Oh yeah, the episode where Barry and Cisco end up going back to Earth 2, where um, Dr. Wells, the different Dr. Wells, not the Eborn Thawne doppelganger version of him, but the actual Dr. Wells from the Earth 2. That was pretty cool. A lot, I can understand why some people were pretty let down with the season finale, because they actually teased the fact that Dr. Wells' daughter Jessie actually had metahuman powers, and as well as Wally. They both debuted in this season, and they got hit by the particle accelerator that Dr. Wells was trying to experiment, and Barry tried to get his powers back after Zoom ended up devouring his a couple episodes prior. So it seemed like when the explosion happened, they thought it ended up contaminating. I don't know if that's the right verb to describe it, but just basically using because there was a little bit of a malfunction going on. So Wally and Jesse escaped from their prison, and they ended up getting affected by the particle accelerator. And even despite that, they never really teased the fact that they had any sort of powers of sorts. So I guess that's what one of the things that kind of one of the flaws of that episode, that I can understand why people were a little let down by that season finale episode. Um, but nevertheless, I mean, I gotta say, season two of Flash, I thought was pretty solid. I mean, I honestly preferred the first season. I thought it had a better motivation, and just having Barry trying to adjust to his new powers as the Flash, and really trying to establish himself and really understand his inner strength, and basically his chemistry with Dr. Wells, who ended up becoming the doppelganger. But even despite that, but just the dynamic of mentor versus student, I thought that was pretty cool. Um, yeah, so I'm definitely going to be looking forward to season three. I mean, it's not as bad, at least compared to the current state of Arrow. So I mean, I'm still enjoying the Flash for the most part. Definitely like the cast. Definitely like some of the adult actors. Like Jesse Martin from Law and Order, and Tom Cavanaugh just doing his thing. Um, yeah, so I definitely look forward to season 3 of The Flash, and I could see maybe Barry Allen going through sort of a phase of It's a Wonderful Life type of approach, where maybe Barry goes back to his own time, but realizes that that things are different now. That maybe Barry might have never hooked up with Iris. Maybe Eddie, who got killed off at the end of season 1, might be still in the couple with Iris. So maybe Eddie might be still be alive, especially if Barry never became the Flash, and they don't really, and the rest of the gang don't realize that Dr. Wells is is actually someone else. Um, yeah, so I mean, I could be wrong as far as that prediction's concerned, but it's kind of one of those, just trying to hypothesize or predict what's going to happen. But I mean, then again, season 3 hasn't been produced at the moment. You also have the Flashpoint episode, so I mean, there's been talks about having a 4-night crossover event. Especially even before like Supergirl went to the CW. I mean, there've been talks about it, but now that that show's going on the CW, so basically they have all the four main DC television shows that they have in their disposal. That's really my thoughts on the Flash, and basically my thoughts on this whole topic in general. So feel free to comment down in the comment section below. Tell me what your thoughts are regarding these 3 shows. And until next time, this is the GSTV reviewer signing out.